So we have this quilt here that we went ahead and started marking. Now I just want to kind of go over some of the things that you need to do before you start marking your quilt. So there's a few tools that you're going to need. To me, there's two of the most important tools, I don't know if you would agree, are like some sort of ruler. So this is a yardstick. We also have just like one of our cutting boards or cutting rulers. And
well, ours is a little like a see-through, a little specialty yardstick, but just the ones you get at the hardware store will work just
doesn't
fine.
have to be anything fancy. And the other tool that I think is essential whenever it comes to this type of quilting is a heat activated or heat disappearing type pen. This pen that we use is a Frixion, and what happens is you can mark to your heart's content on fabric, but like as soon as it comes in contact with any type of heat, such as an iron or even whenever you wash it, it completely disappears and it's gone forever. And so these are a quilter's best friend, and especially every beginner quilter's best friend.
They do have some other marking pens on the market that are water soluble instead of heat erasing.
Yeah.
But what we like the best about these is it's a crisp line, like an ink pen would do. It's a crisp line. Some of the other ones are a little bit they're wider and not as crisp.
Yeah,
so that's why we like this one.
Yeah, and it's also another reason why I love this pen is because whenever you go to iron it after you're done sewing it, it is so satisfying. it's like magic, and it's mesmerizing, and I feel like it is
pretty fun.
It's really fun, and I feel like it's just your reward for putting all the work into quilting, and so
it's a magical moment.
It is so magical, so magical.
Well, and we also need in a little bit. It really helps to have some kind of a glove that's a little bit rubbery. So
sticky almost, like it's tacky.
I even have bought those cheap garden gloves that have a little bit of that rubbery finger. Yeah. That works. Just something to help be able to push the quilt just a little bit easier. Your fingers get slippery sometimes.
Yeah.
Even the rubber dishwashing gloves,
just want something
cleaning
with grip.
Gloves,
like
those are hot, so I don't like those, but you could even use those, and you'll see what we mean by that when you get started quilting. You'll understand that.
Yeah, so these are a pretty important tool as well, so if you can buy these, get them. So we're just kind of going to show you our thought process whenever it came to this quilt. So you can tell with this pattern, it's very linear, right? It's like you have very, very straight lines here, very, very straight lines here. And so whenever we were trying to decide what kind of quilt pattern we decided we wanted something that went against the grain, so to speak.
Now let me just interrupt you real quick, because if you're wondering, well, I don't know anything about the designs, we actually got this idea off of Pinterest. So if you just type in straight line quilting designs, you'll come up with more than you thought you would, with ideas, and perhaps they'll just inspire you to think outside the box a little bit on straight line quilting. But any kind of a straight line is what you could definitely be able to do on your home sewing machine. We want you to be successful, and there's different patterns out there. So look it up on Pinterest or Google it, or
there's so many ideas online, you guys, like use that resource. So for this one, we decided to go against the grain, like I said, which is why we decided to do kind of these two triangles that intersect and they go across the lines as opposed to going with the lines. It's just the look that we were going for. If you want a different look, then go with something that goes with the grain. It's your quilt. Do what you want.
Anything goes nowadays.
Anything goes. Anything goes. And and so we did that, but then we decided to add these little lines right here too.
Well, only because there was like this empty space. Yeah. And with quilting, batting does have requirements, and you need to kind of know what those requirements are. But this particular batting, you have to quilt no greater than 8 inches.
Yeah, and 8 inches is quite a bit.
Yeah, so this right here, we just wanted to fill that in, and that just helps keep that whole sandwich together. And I actually like the puckering that happens, so I decided just to fill in that space. But some batting is every 4 inches, no greater than 4 inches. Some is 6, some is 8. So you just need to know that.
Isn't it typically the higher the quality of batting, the further you can quilt, right?
Yeah.
Because that way the batting isn't falling apart as much as the lower quality batting is. And so you're able to have a little bit more, I don't know, a little bit more flexibility with that. So we are going to, so now that this is completely marked, we're going to take it over to the sewing machine and we'll kind of show you how we actually quilt.
Now this one too, probably with linear quilting, you do need to create dots along the way. So you basically are connecting the dots because you do want the lines to stay straight in linear quilting, and it is easy to kind of get it a little wonky if you're intending it to be straight. So like something like this, you would definitely want a fairly straight line. So for this one here, we knew, and you got to do a little bit of math in there, but we just did little dots every 2 inches up the side in that side, and then we just connected the dots with how we knew the design was going to go. And that does help keep it straight when you want it to be straight. So just remember that little trick. Actually down the center too, we did every 4 inches down the center, so we knew that these lines were going to meet up exactly. So that's just a little tidbit of information.
Yeah. Good tip, Mom. Thanks for bringing that up.
All right, so we've actually started sewing this already. You'll see these lines right here. We've used a gray thread on this. So that's why if this is looking different to you, we have sewn this triangle set right here.
Yeah.
So Emily's going to work on sewing this, and then we'll come back and show you how to trim it up. So now that we're at the sewing machine and Emily's getting started, I just want to cover just a couple little things. So when you quilt, I typically like to kind of start in the center and work my way out. Now for us, we do use spray glue, and that holds our quilts together, so you could really start anywhere. But I still like to start in the center and work my way out. So Emily's kind of, she is not all the way in the middle, but kind of in the middle. So anyways, just a little tip for you. Also, you want to use a large stitch length. So we set ours at 3.5, and that's what I would recommend for you.
I actually think we could go a little bit. I think we can go a little bit bigger. There we go.
So I usually use 3.5 because there's some drag when you try to pull the quilt through. It's a little bit hard, and so that stitch length, that's 3.5, will actually go down to, I think, more like a 3 or 2.5. But there's a couple ways to push your quilt through the machine because it's a little bit harder, especially on maybe the machines that aren't quite as expensive. And believe me, they're as expensive as cars, so quilt machines get quite expensive. Emily's is just a very basic machine, so we want you just to know that it can be done on a basic machine if that's what you have. So there's a little bit of fabric you have to work with. Now this space right here, this little space right here between the needle and the body of the machine is called your throat space. And this machine has a pretty small throat space.
Very small.
Oh, you got it caught there. We're good. So it feels a little bulky at times, but as you see Emily sew it, you kind of want to gather the fabric and push it through. So whatever is going under the throat is the part that you tend to want to roll up or bunch up in some way to help it go through. Now to actually help it through the machine, there's a couple different approaches. So if you can see Emily's hands, you kind of grab each side of it and you push it through. You can do it that way. Sometimes you can also grab the front of it. Grab the front, there we go. Grab the front and you can kind of push it through with your other hand too. You don't want to ever pull it really hard because then it will start distorting the fabric. So you just gently want to pull it through. And when you get to the end of a row, let me just show them real quick. When you get to the end of the row, on most of the linear designs, you're going to go right off of the fabric onto the batting, and then you don't want to cut your thread. That's one of the most important things with quilting is you want to cut your thread as
Little as possible.
little as possible. You want that continuous
Motion.
pattern of thread to just keep going, so you don't need to cut it. So she's just going to sew, and you can actually, she pulled it out, but you could actually just sew to the next line and then go up. So we're going to let her finish this, and then we will come back and show you how to finish the quilt.
Now we're at the iron, and I finished quilting everything. So now we're going to take it over to the iron so we can get rid of those pen marks from where we marked where we wanted to sew and to quilt it. So you can see the pink along here, and so I have my iron and it's super hot, okay? And just watch this. Do you see that? It is like magic. This is my favorite part. So you don't have to press hard. You just kind of lightly go over all of the pen, and it disappears. And so you just you do this over the entire quilt, and then you just trim it up. And then you're ready for the last and final part of the quilt, which is the binding. So let me just finish ironing this, and we'll show you how to trim things up.
All right, so now that the magic happened with the iron, we're going to show you the final step before the binding, and that is cleaning up the edges of your quilt. So all of this hanging, that's leftover extra stuff that you need for quilting is now, we are going to take it off. We're going to square up the edges. Now what you want to pay attention when you square up the edges is if there's like any seam lines in here, like right here I've got these horizontal seam lines. Use the lines on your ruler and try to line that up. Now, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's not going to be exactly straight, but try to get it as straight as you can. So if you kind of line them up at the seams, that's usually the best bet to get it straight. So here I'm using, I can use these seams going this way with the lines on the ruler going this way, or I can use these. So you can kind of see, sometimes it doesn't always line up perfect. That's just the nature of quilting. It pulls the fabric in, and it's natural to have a little bit of distortion, but that's what makes it homemade. So we're just going to go along here and square this up so we can get the binding on it. Alrighty, and you want to get as close to the edge as you can. Okay, so this is a good example to see. So right here, I've lined it up pretty much even, but do you see how this kind of went up a little bit? That's not good. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to come back and just cut a little bit more off of it, because we want the binding to have the best connection with the quilt as possible. So this we are going to have to cut off. And this, if it happens to you, this is just normal. All right, so as you can see in that trim, that took off that batting that was showing, and that's what you want. Actually, I can't cut that way, so I have to flip it around. And we will just continue along here. So we really hope that you have enjoyed this process so far. It is supposed to be something fun and enjoyable. Don't need to hurry, just take your time and really just enjoy the process. And I promise you, whether this is for you or it's for a gift for a baby shower or wedding, you know, like a lap quilt, it will be cherished for whoever the lucky person is that gets your beautiful quilt. Thanks for joining us for the tutorial on quilting. The next one is going to be on binding, so we hope you join us.